Daydreaming about dragons. So, had a really fun Sunday morning where I sat down online over Slack with my buddy Jay, and we looked at the factions in his Stars Without Number game. And I'll have a link to it because he's actually streaming it, and it's a really cool cast, and it's a really cool game, and you should totally watch it if you're into that. So I want to talk about a little bit about what questions I asked and what I do when my friend comes to me and says, hey, I just need to brainstorm about a game. Cool. So I'm also going to have a link to Sectors Without Number, which is this amazing resource for Stars Without Number or any game, sci-fi game, where it will generate a sector for you, a sector of space. And you can kind of fill in your own factions or look at their factions or whatever you want. It's pretty damn awesome. I am pretty excited by it. So we looked at his factions and that sector of space. He kind of narrowed it down to a little constellation, and it was pretty awesome. So what do we do? Well, the factions have these assets, right? So I was looking at the assets, and some of them are just really awesome. Different types of soldiers, psychic assassins, cyber ninjas. Cool. So what do you want to do with that? I don't really necessarily want to just say like psychic ninjas attack or psychic assassins attack or cyber ninjas even attack. Or soldiers attack who are from the XYZ faction. I want to name them, right? Because if you look at science fiction and space opera, cool soldiers, cool martial factions have names, right? The Sardukar, the Stormtroopers, all of them. They've got names to them so that they can get kind of a mystique, and you know who you're fighting, and you know what's going to be happening when you're fighting them, and so we looked at the various types of soldiers, and we started giving names and thinking about names and thinking about what it would be like to serve with that faction, and that's fun because then you can have NPCs who are veterans who served in those factions in various conflicts, and you can flesh things out. You make an apple pie, and suddenly you've got the whole universe. And that's kind of what we're doing here, right? We're making an apple pie, and suddenly now when we have an NPC, they can be like, oh, I ate that apple pie. That was not so great, not the best apple pie. So, there's that saying, in order to make an apple pie, you first have to make the universe. Well, we're kind of doing the reverse of that. We're starting with something little and just building off of it. If somebody has psychic assassins or saboteurs or cyber ninjas or even venture capitalists, what does that look like? Who are those people? What do they do? What happens when they swoop in and take over a small business? So give names to things, and that will help you describe them, and that will help you give an idea of what they look like and what they feel like, and how people feel about them. It starts building a culture. That's where we started. I just started asking him questions about it, giving ideas like, hey, what about this? Ooh, wait a minute, what about that? And the other thing I do when I'm brainstorming with a friend is I try not to just be like the good idea guy. I want it to be a conversation. So it's like, what do you think of this? Or what do you think of that? Because I know when I'm brainstorming with people, not half, but a good deal of the what I get out of it is rejecting bad ideas because it helps me formulate what it is I actually want. So sometimes it's like, no, that's a little too Star Warsy. Can we dial it back towards aliens and Dune? And we can, move those dials until we get to where we need to be. So I'm always asking questions, giving little snippets of, oh, wouldn't it be cool if? And leaving plenty of room for my friend who I'm brainstorming with, who's going to be jamming this stuff in public. He's streaming it, but even if they're not streaming it, it's theirs. It belongs at their table. I'm just honored to have been asked to come along and play a little bit. So yeah, that's what I do. I riff, give cool ideas, but also asking a lot of questions, and just trying to get that conversation going. And of course, with Jay, it was super easy. Super duper easy. And then once we kind of started to get an idea of who the factions were, and I got an idea of what Jay was thinking about them, and what resources they were, dealing with. A lot of his sector, I'm not giving any spoilers, is about a black hole. So the ship that the crew has is a black hole mining ship. And I love that. Damn, black hole mining and black hole fracking. It's just, those ideas are terrifying and amazing and so sci-fi to me that I loved it. And I told Jay I loved it right away. I don't know who thought of that, but man, they're geniuses. So it's really cool to think of that you can mine a black hole. It's just awesome. I love it. I love it in so many. It's so sci-fi. It hurts. So that was cool. So we talked about that a lot. Talked about just different factions, what they were doing, and then we started talking about players and trying to weave them into this, right? And how we're going to ensnare them and how they're a part of things. And not everybody has to be right embroiled in, right? If you the easiest way to look at it is, I think, think about the original Star Wars group, right? Han doesn't have a relative in the Empire, right? But Darth Vader is Luke and Leia's father, but that doesn't make it the conflicts any less interesting to Han. So you don't have to embroil everyone into everything and just weave it all together. But you want to give everyone something as to why they're here, and what's going to be happening and what people are going to be pressuring them to do. And Stars Without Number gives you some tools for that. That there are drives and goals, I think. But so we talked about those a little bit and vibed in those, and I'm not going to even talk about those because there's a lot of spoilerific stuff going on there. But it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun just thinking about what the relationships out there in the sector could be, and playing with those toys. And that's what I wanted to talk about. Talking to a friend about their game and helping them brainstorm it. It's really fun. It's a really fun thing to do. And I recommend you do it. If you have friends who move away and start running a game for another group, be like, hey, what's going on in your game? Want to talk about it? Want to brainstorm? Are you stuck on anything? Have any ideas that you're like half-formed? Or just tell me about it and I'll riff with you. I just find that to be a lot of fun, and I'd love to hear about it. If you do you do that kind of thing? Do you riff with your friends about their games that you're not in? It's cool. Sometimes it makes it like, oh, I'm not in your game. Cool, I get to talk to you about your game. It's a lot of fun. Let me know. Let me know how that works at and around your tables, phones, keyboards, etc. All right, let's get to some Inspiration Goat. All right, Inspiration Goat. This is an interesting one because it's not really one book. It's not really grabbing anything out of any one place. It's talking about a few different, kind of the trinity for me, of science fiction, inspiration, and thinking about the dials. And I talked about the dials a little bit in the last segment, so I thought I might talk about them a little more. They're in my head. I don't know what they mean. I don't know how I'm going to use them. I don't know if they're anything but a kind of vague science fiction-y weird thing. But anyway, here they are. I've got a triangle in my head. And the most influential science fiction franchises, especially visually, right? So I've got three, and they're very different. I've got Dune, the Aliens franchise, and Star Wars, right? Those are entirely different movies. And a matter of fact, it could be argued that Star Wars belongs nowhere near this, right? But I'm putting Star Wars there to represent the kind of space opera Flash Gordon vibe. I feel like that dial should be in play when you're dealing with science fiction. And so there it stays. For me, You can set your dials any way you want, and your dials can be entirely different. And I picked those three because I can find a lot of good stuff for them, a lot of good visual things for them when I look them up on the internet. So I can, it's not, when I set the dials, it's not a hard prescribed thing. It's just me trying to fiddle with stuff, right? With the Alien and Aliens franchise, we get this very industrial, working class space thing, where, a spaceship almost looks like a piece of construction equipment, until we get to Aliens, and then we get kind of a more military thing. But even the military is very low tech, right? It's kind of chill compared to, how cold it could be with drones and that kind of stuff. How alien it could look, how different it could look than what war looks like now. War kind of still looks like war in the Aliens world. All right, so what visual cues am I picking up from, let's say, another point on this ridiculous dial structure? We've got Dune in there, and Dune's a big hot mess, right? Because we've got a TV show, we've got a movie from David Lynch, we got another movie coming soon with probably a trailer coming out any day now, and we've got the books, and we've got tons of art from lots of different places. But I think what we're looking for with Dune is kind of a Baroque, I call it Knives in Space vibe, where, it's 10,000 years from now, and shit is complicated. So, yeah, that's what I'm getting from Dune. David Lynch visually got a lot of things that I thought were interesting. So he definitely colors my vision of it. It's a deeply flawed movie. And the weirding modulators make me flinch because it's just nothing like what was in the book. And I think it could have been more interesting without them. But be that as it may, visually I think it's very interesting. And that's very often what we're looking for with these dials, is visually. And then we come to Star Wars, which has so much art, right? You can every movie that has come out, and all the TV shows have kind of a visual dictionary that you can buy, and like visual encyclopedias, and they're really cool. Lots of background, lots of myth, just tons of stuff. I remember looking at one of them and seeing that a bad guy from The Last Jedi had a ring with a stone from Mustafar, which I believe was Darth Vader's castle. What a cool detail. Only saw it in that book, never saw it, and never even noticed it in the movie. But there it is. Kind of interesting. So again, with Star Wars, I think we're getting more of a Flash Gordon vibe, right? The ships can look very different, but there is a kind of an aesthetic there that I think we can tease out, even though the movies look very different and different parts of the world look very different. But yeah, I keep it on the dial because I feel like it has a very different feel than the other two. So what is useful about this? Well, it's useful. It can be useful because I think one of the things we're discovering as I'm talking about this, hopefully together, we're figuring out that when you say Star Wars or Dune or Aliens, you might get a very different response from people based on where they came in, right? With the Alien franchise and the Aliens franchise, do they really only remember Aliens? Do they remember Alien at all when it was kind of like a horror thing? Did they come in with a comic book or one of the novels? I think you gotta, when you're talking about any of these things, you've got to really get more specific. I was talking about this with Strash months ago, where when you're talking about Dune, you've got to ask somebody, what are you talking about? They might be talking about the sci-fi series. They might be talking about David Lynch. They might be talking about weirding modulators. They might be talking about the books his son put out. They might be talking, who knows what, they might be talking about just the first book, Dune. which is, I think, a legitimate way to take in Dune. So when you're talking about these things, what is it you mean? What is it to you? Because otherwise we can have a we can have a huge miscommunication. And so the dials are interesting to me when I'm thinking about, especially with Stars Without Number, which I feel like can really vary, right? You can play a game of Stars Without Number where you are just like working class, blue collar, astronaut freelancers, you know, bouncing around as the factions do their thing. Or you can be, you know, space gods, you know, leveling factions and as big players. And a lot of room in between. So I think you got to have that. I think this is just another, I think the dials for me are just a way to frame the conversation and a way to kind of create stuff. So I have a shorthand with myself, you know? And you can even, you know, have the dials mean different things. You know, you can imagine these as dials and imagine that there are different rings, right? So you might have something that's aesthetically very Star Wars, but in its focus and themes, very Aliens, right? Oh, interesting. So we're doing like a working class kind of down on the ground Star Wars thing, you know, and that's maybe if you're doing some kind of Rebels game where it's like you're those guys in the trench at Hoth. Oh, interesting. Cool. You can play with those dials and do different things. Maybe, you know, we're shoving everything way down away from Aliens and in between, right in between on the triangle, Dune and Star Wars. Cool. You know, what does that look like? Are those the noble families who served the Emperor and helped abolish the Senate? You know, who are they? Do they even exist? I have no idea. But there were those kind of like pale, freaky dudes who had action figures with the Emperor back in the day. You know, those Emperor's guards must have been recruited from someone. So that's an you know, the noble families of Coruscant is kind of an interesting thing. Maybe there are like 33 moons of Coruscant, and each family has a moon. Awesome. Suddenly we've got kind of a Dune a la Star Wars game. And that's how I would use it. That's how I would use these kind of dials. Just to be able to make stuff up fast and get a shorthand, and then we can flesh it out more later. And that's where I'm at. That's where Inspiration Goat and I are talking about. We're thinking about, you know, what the pillars of a genre are for us, and then finding a middle ground, especially when they're very developed franchises. Dare I say overdeveloped, right? And you have a lot of cool art from amazingly talented artists who have been working on this damn thing for years. So, interesting stuff. Cool. If you've got dials, who would be in your dial trinity? You know, and I didn't even do fantasy. Maybe we'll do fantasy another time. But who would be in yours? Who would be in your trinity for science fiction, for fantasy, for whatever? Love to hear it. Urban, you know, urban fantasy. Who would be yours? And how would you use it? And have you used it? I don't know. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on breaking down genre and thinking about the Titans and pulling cues and themes out of them. It doesn't have to be deep, you know, but you can just pull kind of visual cues or whatever. All right. I'd love to hear from you. Let me know if you want to know how I can hear from you. I'll have more info on that in the outro. Here we go. Thank you so much for listening. The easiest way to support this show is to send me some feedback. You can send me an MP3. You can send me an MP3 via the Anchor app, but that's only a minute at a time, and some people find that frustrating, which I understand. So you can also just record yourself on your phone, put that onto your email, and send me an MP3 that way. That's fine. I'm not positive I'm going to use everything, but I would darn sure try, and the least I'll do is reply to you and say, hey, thank you so much. So that's the easiest way. You can email me, you can send me an MP3, you can MP3 at me through the Anchor app, you can tweet at me, whatever you'd like. You can write your own blog post, you can make your own podcast and record a segment and say, "Dear Judd, what are you talking about, dude? Inspiration Goat has clearly butted you in the head and you have come away with a concussion." So let me know. Hopefully you don't do that. I'd like you to please be nice. But an Inspiration Goat's a very gentle goat. You would never do that. Very playful. So let me know. That's the best way to support me right now. There is money support, and I am very grateful for the people who have done that. But right now, with the world as it is, I am channeling money to Black Lives Matter and other charities. So I will have links to those charities in the show notes. And if you would like to give it to one of those charities, that'd be great. If you think like, oh my goodness, this was an amazing episode, I got a lot out of it, I need to give this dude some money, that's great. Maybe a charity is the best way to go. And if you want to give locally, a food pantry, there's so many people in need right now. There's so much going on. There are other ways other people need support more than me at this moment. But thank you very much for thinking of me. And I will also have in the show notes a link to my Pinterest page, which has the 3 dials from the science fiction Trinity dials that I mentioned in the Inspiration Goat segment. And that is about it. We are in the hottest part of summer here upstate, and it's getting kind of brutal. But the AC is on, and it's Sunday, and it almost seems like the living is easy, but I'm not sure it is. Anyway, I'll see you in a week, if not less, and I'll talk to you then. Bye-bye.